Hello and welcome to Game Theory's Ask the Expert session. My name is Claudia Sestini and I'm the Global CMO at Game Theory. Game Theory is a global marketing effectiveness consultancy that empowers marketers to make faster, more agile, data-informed decisions via data, advanced analytics and consultancy at our core. We're part of WPP, of course, which means that we have a wealth of marketing and media knowledge, and we have deep expertise in answering wider business questions such as forecasting, scenario planning, and pricing. So today I have the pleasure of having with me two fantastic experts at Game Theory. We have Karen Kaufman and Sean O'Neill, who we will introduce very shortly. But before that, I just wanted to give you a sense of what to expect. The focus of the session today will be around planning with certainty during uncertain times. And throughout the session, you'll be able to ask our experts questions. We will moderate the questions and swing them over to Karen and Sean. But I guess let's take a step back first of all. What do we actually mean by planning with certainty during uncertain times? Well, if we think about sort of the old world, the pre-COVID world, you know, marketers knew how to answer most business questions with a degree of confidence. And we really think that came from years of investment in data and analytics. Now, obviously, we have less certainty in what's going on. In terms of data availability, there's a sort of question mark in terms of what data is available. And marketers are sort of left wondering, what should we do next when we don't know what's going to happen next? So the old rules have sort of gone out the window. And it does put some marketers in a situation where finance departments are having to take the reins a little bit more and make marketing decisions. So with that in mind, and that context in mind, I'd love to introduce our experts here today, Sean and Karen, and I'm going to swing over to Sean and you know, get you to introduce yourself. Sean, tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are at Game Theory and what clients you serve. But also I'm really interested to hear, during the quarantine period, how have you been keeping your sanity on a personal level?
Well, Claudia, I won't lie, there's been a lot of wine involved in my sanity. That keeps things going on every day. But the reality is that as CEO of North America, there's a lot of work going on. So we're keeping things together here at Game Theory and helping our clients continue to do what they and we do best. My background is about a dozen years with Unilever, the last 5 of which I ran analytics globally. And prior to that, some time with McKinsey, Pepsi Cola, some other consulting that led me ultimately to Game Theory, and a wonderful place that we're running here today.
Fantastic. And how are you keeping sane? Are you doing a lot of exercise? Are you baking? What's keeping your sanity?
Not a baker per se, but I am spending a lot of time with my family. That is kind of nice. My oldest is 18, getting ready to leave the house, and I got a 14 and 11-year-old, and so we're spending more time than I thought we would ever get to spend before this all ends.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sean. So over to you, Karen. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background, you know, where you've worked in the past before Game Theory, what you do for Game Theory now. And I'm really curious to hear, what's your positive take at the moment? There must be some really cool positive stuff, despite the fact that we've all been in quarantine.
Hi, everyone. I am Karen Kaufman, and I am Game Theory's Global Chief Strategy Officer. My role is to work with Game Theory to make sure that we have the right products and services to deliver to our clients today, but also that we think about what are the necessary products and services for our clients into the future. I also work very closely with many of our North American clients, making sure that we're really thinking strategically about their business and bringing the best data and insight to the table to make sure that we're really informing the decisions that our clients make moving forward. In terms of Claudia's second question around what's keeping me what's my positive silver lining, I think from a work perspective, I've been really thrilled at the connections that our teams have been able to make with each other and also with our clients, really making sure that we're checking in, that we're seeing how things are going and that we're able to do that remotely. And then from a personal perspective, I am a terrible, terrible cook, but I'm thrilled that I've actually taught myself how to bake bread. So that's something I've always wanted to do, and I'm really excited about it.
Fantastic, brilliant. The whole sort of baking frenzy has taken many a nation as heart. But what's quite interesting, and perhaps a separate Q&A session, is how people are getting hold of flour right now and what they're using in the absence of flour and sometimes eggs. But as I say, separate session. So I guess the first question, and this one's to you, Karen, is it is a fairly crazy world right now. So for marketers specifically, they're going through an incredible stress test. And, you know, I've heard it likened to a storm, but people being on different boats. So, you know, you could say that if you're in grocery retail right now, you know, you've got the demand coming in, perhaps supply is an issue. If you are, you know, another type of retailer that's had to shut down, you know, what do you do as a marketer? So there's lots of, you know, really big sort of stress tests. But the question is, what is the role of marketers right now? What role can they play during these really uncertain times when it's really tricky to plan with certainty?
I think, you know, from my perspective, it's important to take a pause and to remember that marketers have been investing in data and insight for a really long time now, and that information is more valuable now than ever before. So what I would recommend is that you should really take stock of what information is available to help make sure that we're really making the right decisions for the business. I think there's a natural inclination today for marketers and also finance teams just to say, let's start by cutting. But I think there's a smart way we can do that. And so looking at what is information that we have, how can we make sure that we're really making informed decisions? How can we make sure that we're bringing information back to the organization to understand not just the decisions we're making, but why we're making those decisions is really important today.
So taking that pause and really kind of stop and think, and that moment of not needing to panic would be your advice. Brilliant, fantastic. And I guess, Sean, for you, in a world where we don't know what's going to happen next, how do marketers ensure that their investment doesn't go to waste?
So, you know, we're in this moment in time where change is all around us, and marketers have an opportunity to lead. More than any other function in the organization, they are, one, being tasked with understanding the future, because if you look at finance, sales, supply chain, that's not going to change dramatically. But for the marketer, consumer habits are going to change, media consumption is going to change, the way people are living their lives and their priorities is going to change. And for the marketer then, in order to make sure that the investments they make now are the right investments and the best investments for their organization to get to the other side of this thing, it's going to be critical that they are learning quickly, that they are using all the information and analytics around them immediately, not waiting till next year to see when the dust clears. And it's going to be the defining moment between competitive advantage and market share gains that will be lasting for the future. So those marketers who understand which media types are effective today, understand which channels are doing well in a COVID world and are able to project what post-COVID and the new normal starts to look like, and invest wisely behind that in things that they can measure ROI, and they can communicate that with their finance teams and work closely to make those investments well, will be the ones who win share that's never given back in the future. And we've seen that in recession after recession. The companies and the brands and the businesses that go through the recession and are the strongest and invest in their brands gain market share. That shares are never given away in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sean. And Karen, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts is in terms of, how marketers can navigate not knowing what's happening next without that map. How do they ensure the investment doesn't go to waste? And I know you deal with lots of clients who are asking this question right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more strongly with what Sean just said. I think there is, for those marketers who can afford to invest right now, there is a significant opportunity to win market share. And I've seen studies as well that suggest that the getting new customers to try your product today can have a very substantial effect on the business in the long term. So I think it's really about shifting today how you define success. And what I mean by that is, it's a very standard approach for marketers to think about things like what's my incremental volume or incremental sales or my return on investment. But if we slightly tweak that for today and think about how can I gain more share of wallet? How can I gain more share of interest or more share of consideration? Those are equally important in today's time where categories are constricting. I think if we think about beyond the immediate, and Sean alluded to this, we really don't know what that new normal is going to look like or even when it's going to take place. And so I've been talking to a lot of marketers about thinking about agile planning and no longer thinking about what am I going to do from a planning perspective annually, but instead, what might happen? Imagine a world where it might look like a certain way or another way, and then coming up with a variety of different plans that will take advantage of those different types of realities. And then importantly, thinking about what is the data I can use that will sort of infer that I'm moving in one direction or another so that I can be incredibly agile and pivot my marketing strategy to make sure that I'm taking advantage of anything that might come.
Just to continue that thought, Karen, because I think that's great. The last 5 years have given us data that's moving closer to the speed of business than ever in history. And the ability to harness and bring those insights from that data to your marketers, to your company, to your finance team to suggest, okay, I recognize we're making cuts, but here's how I want to change the strategy that could give me a higher ROI. Because the world right now, we're already seeing in April that Facebook cost per million to buy Facebook advertising is down like 40%. Digital on average is down like 10%. There are massive bargains and places to put money and time that you wouldn't have had before. So if you have the data and you can understand quickly what's working, what's not, you know what your financials are behind those buys, it can change dramatically the investment and the return that you're going to get, even in these tough times.
Fantastic. And I have a really brilliant question here that's just popped up. Before we move on to that next question, I'm going to read this out because it's quite a substantial question and I think it's a really valid question. So in this unprecedented time, is it right to continue to model our brands when our consumers and shopper behaviors are very different? Our input variables in the model are very different compared to what we normally see. The trust on the models will be low, so advanced analytics modeling by our end stakeholders, and so trust is low. And when do you apply the learnings from the models measuring in the pandemic situation? If the answer is to halt the modeling work, then when should we go back to i.e. post-COVID world, when promotion and above the line investments are back to normal? Does that make sense? And I think it's a fantastic question. So thank you very much for the person who asked that.
Very good question. Do you want to go first, Karen? I have ideas, but you might want to go first.
You can both.
Why don't you could go first and then I'll jump in.
So there's kind of several thoughts behind this question. The first is that we still live in a world that is defined in many regards by what was going on prior. So just because the past and the future are different doesn't mean that you forego the past or that you ignore it or that you decide that that's not relevant. Another piece of this is understanding the break between pre-COVID and post-COVID, because the more you understand about that disconnect, you're going along this way and things change dramatically, the more you understand about the drivers of that point in time that modeling gives you, the better able you are going to be able to predict the future and understand what's important and what's not important going from pre to post. And then thirdly is you'll get to a point in this year where that modeling will make a ton of sense. In the nearer term and in the closer to what's going on today, any kind of techniques that give you the ability to see and model data as it's coming through will be dramatically more informative to you and your business, because you'll start to see the differences in which tactics are working and which are not. What are the drivers that are different than what they were historically? And there are techniques to do that using a wider band of information and data in a shorter time period.
I think if I can add to what Sean said, I think there's two additional points I would make. The first is that we absolutely don't need to abandon everything that's been done in the past. There are ways in which we can take even the existing models and calibrate those to be more reflective of today's reality. And we're doing that for a lot of clients today, taking into account things like how consumers changing media behaviors or marketing interactions, how those are changing and what that means in terms of media or marketing response. We're taking into account differences in media costs as well. So there are ways we can take existing models and use those to make sure that we're really making the right decisions for the business. When it comes to should we model today, should we refresh an existing model? I think there's a lot that can be learned in times like this, but it really means reframing the question that we're asking. So what I mean by that is the world is not the same, but also we don't necessarily want to generalize. If we look at the United States, the behaviors that exist definitely vary by geography. Behaviors change by audience. And there are ways that we can build really compelling models that allow us to really dig into that, to start to say, are there ways we can tailor a media strategy to unique geographies as they come back to the new normal? Are there certain audiences that still seem to be less price sensitive? And are those the ones that we should be targeting? And if so, how? So I think it's really about taking a step back and saying, what is it that we want to learn today that will be applicable to how I manage the business today? And how can I then generate new insights that might be valuable 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now?
Yeah, I can't imagine being on the business side and not having a look. Say I'm planning 2021 and I'm trying to do that in post-COVID kind of understanding without having done some of the modeling and the work in connecting dots between pre and post, such that I could make estimates and forecasts and predictions about what 2021 might look like given the break in trends and the new things that are happening. And I can't imagine not doing the models in that case, or at least some form of them or modified version of them.
Fantastic, brilliant. So, and I think that that was an excellent question to ask, by the way, and actually really segues quite nicely into the next question that we have here for Sean, which is around what data and analytics specifically. So, what data and analytics methodologies, solutions, products are available to marketers right now to help justify plans and investment in the near term. So this piece about justification is going to be quite a key one. And I have another question here on the forum, which we'll come back to, specific to working with finance. But let's start with data and analytics. What's available right now for the near term, Sean?
Sure. So if just getting us just level setting a bit the question, what marketing mix modeling and modeling in general has given us is it's given us a language that works for finance. So the return on marketing investment, the return on spending, gives a finance person understanding of what they're getting for what they're giving. Now that is the key cornerstone for how we think about going forward and looking for our ways and methodologies that continue to provide that kind of insight. There are ways that that we're working on. We have a program, a product that we call Sensor, and Sensor gives us, in the last 3 months, it gives us relative investment values for the tactics and the deep level analysis that is taking place. So if you're starting to look post-COVID at what is working, what is not, that kind of analysis would work brilliantly for that kind of scenario. Also, you could start looking in, and Karen might chime in on this one a little bit, but the idea of scenarios, making and doing scenarios, meaning if it goes this well or if it goes that well, will give us different ranges of financial impact and business return on investment that you can use with your finance team to say low risk to high risk, what we believe we'll get for our activity. And there's things like ABM, and I think Karen's more versed in ABM and how you would use that, but it creates those scenarios and those kinds of tools on a regular basis.
And for the benefit of people dialed in today who don't know what ABM is, I'd love for Karen, if you're okay, to explain to us agent-based modeling. What is it? It sounds pretty cool. Could you expand on that?
Sure. So as Sean and Claudia alluded to, there are, before I get into ABM, I think it's important to recognize that, while market mix modeling or attribution or multi-touch attribution have become common approaches today to measuring marketing's impact, there are lots of other approaches that can be used. And it's important, I think, for us when we think about what the right methodology is, to think about what is the business question that we're trying to answer and what is the right approach. And it might be marketing mix or attribution, but it might be something else. And I think one of the approaches that we've been talking to lots of clients today about is agent-based modeling, or ABM. The idea behind ABM is it allows us to scenario plan or war game in environments that are not certain or in categories that are experiencing a large amount of disruption. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it, but essentially what you can think about is it's sort of a two-phase process. So the first phase is where we're trying to understand how a marketplace operates. How do consumers make decisions to buy one brand over another brand? What are the influencers that can drive those decisions? And we're creating a model that helps to explain that environment. The second piece of ABM, and perhaps the more important part, is once we've created that environment, we can run a whole variety of scenarios and start to say, what would happen if? A great example is in retail. What would happen if my main competitor went bankrupt because of COVID and totally went out of the market? Where would those shoppers go? And what can I do from an influential perspective? What drivers can I pull to drive incremental market share? Another example, we've talked to a lot of pharmaceutical marketers to say, when you lose a patent and a generic comes into the marketplace, what would happen? Or what is the role of the doctor and the pharmacist in the decision for a consumer to actually go on and buy a specific script? So we believe that ABM is an incredibly powerful tool and one that could help us really scenario plan for this very uncertain world. beyond ABM, the one thing I do want to add, because I know Sean talked about sensor as one of our products, but I also don't want to discount the value of data exploration. So, in today's time, it's great to have things like market mix modeling or ABM or sensor, but there's a lot of value as well to just digging into a variety of different data sources to understand what's happening today and how consumers are behaving, whether it's consumer survey data, panel data, receipt data, really to understand, are there changes in behaviors that we're observing in the marketplace, and how can we take advantage of those? And so I think data exploration is going to be a critical tool for us now and into the future.
Yes, and I think that's a great point, because there's a lot of questions we're getting around, what data is available right now. What can I use? Again, uncharted territory. So that's really helpful. And I've got lots of fantastic questions here. So let's go back to the previous question. And I think, and I do feel for this marketer, and my heart goes out to you, because obviously your plans have gone out of the window, and so now you have lots of questions. So it's a follow-up question. So all the media plans have gone out of the window, promotion plans, all of that. The question is, are they better off modeling full year 2020 so they can get pre, during and post COVID all in one model with a comprehensive coverage? Any views on that, Sean? I'll pass that on to you to see if you've got a view on that.
Yeah, like most folks, this person, their marketing plan has been COVIDized, as we've been calling it around here. The answer is that yes, you will need to do some form of modeling. Now, it may not be the traditional, the same old. You probably want to modify a lot of things in doing that pre-post look, and it may not be all about your sales necessarily as much as other factors that you would model against to understand pre-post, how those factors are, then you could align that with what that would mean for sales. To give an idea, we're actually putting COVID variables into our models for clients who are continuing, who have like more full-time modeling all the time. And those COVID variables are things like when announcements were made by state, when people go into quarantine, the number of sicknesses reported and deaths actually goes in there, because all of these variables shape, they basically create a curve of the consumer response to COVID. And that consumer response, the timing of it, as it matches up with how people view your business, your brand, and or your sales, redefines then when you look at 2021 and you say, okay, here's where those factors are today. Here's some of the changes that took place because of COVID, and what does that imply when I think about 2021 scenarios and planning? Because I know all of us want to go back to, if not the same budgets, then something very close to the kind of activity that we intended to have in 2020.
And Karen, any views on that yourself?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add to what Sean said is, in addition to wanting to take stake at the end of looking at the entire time period, the pre and the post, for those marketers that still have some money to invest in marketing today, there may be a benefit to trying to get to a learning as quickly as possible. Going back to what we talked about before, there is an opportunity for marketers today to take advantage of what's happening. And so, for example, if your competitors have gone dark, is there an opportunity for you to take advantage of that and to have the right compelling message in the market to start to win some of that market share? And again, Sean said this earlier, but we've seen time and time again that if you can generate new trial today, that oftentimes those customers, if they had a good experience with your brand, will continue even when things return back to the state of normal. So I do think there's an opportunity to look at things in the near term and to apply some of that insight as quickly as possible to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier the fact that the cost of media right now is at an all-time, I don't know if it's all-time low, but certainly very low relative to what it's been the past several years. The actual consumption of media is in digital and TV is going up significantly. So I'm looking at times here where we're talking about media consumption is going up about 10 to 15%, depending on which channel you're talking about. It means that you're paying less to get more in terms of every investment you make out there. So even if all you were doing was testing, it's a good investment relative to anything we've had in the past. That's for darn sure.
Fantastic, brilliant. So hopefully that hits the mark for the person that asked this question. Feel free to ask more. I'm going to go to a question that goes back to finance. So we've just released a fantastic article actually on the Game Theory website about how to ally with your CFO, with the finance team. And this person is asking, how do we make a case for marketing investment when our finance team are in charge of budget allocations, meaning that they've taken the reins, you know, you're not in charge anymore, and they're telling you what to do, and this will be a familiar scenario for many marketers right now. So, Sean, if you don't mind, I'll swing this over to you. Any thoughts on the topic of finance, decision making, and marketers in this situation right now?
Sure. So, pretty universal kind of occurrence that we're finding for companies who are losing revenues, need to have finance step in and make some hard decisions about costs. I mean, at Game Theory, as well as every company that I've ever been in that goes through a recession, that tends to happen. The key is not to fold and go home. The key is to get to the other side of, call it the crisis point. So in many ways, we are in the crisis point still, being under quarantine and having a number of economic factors being radically changed around us, where the finance people don't feel comfortable about knowing how the future is going to be. Therefore, what really needs to happen is leveraging a lot of the things we've been talking about, doing your homework about the best ways, the best information about what's changing and how it's changing, then applying and testing and understanding in small amounts. If you can get small amounts from finance to test your ROIs and see if what these very low cost media buys are actually being more effective than ever in the past, and you're actually driving revenue that you might not have otherwise seen, and preparing yourself essentially for either the back half, the fourth quarter, or if your business is a longer cycle time, 2021. So there's a lot of mindset in there that has to do with using the data, using the tools we're describing, using ROI language with the finance department to, and it depends on your business in some ways, to be ready when the time is right for the next ask, for the next investment, for the next initiative.
So I totally agree with what Sean was saying. And I think the other thing is there's a lot of information that's available in the public domain. Studies, I mean, I did a Google search yesterday and I was surprised at how many studies have all concluded that marketing during a recession leads to better outcomes during the recession and after the recession. So I think putting a business case together for the finance team on what is the short-term value and the longer-term value of advertising and marketing is critical. There's a really interesting business case that we helped a client put together the other day, where we were able to show that for one client who went off air for several months during the recession, when they came back on air, it took them 13 months to build back up to the place that they were prior to going off air. So I think if you can put together the case to say, not only is there a short-term impact of going off air and market share loss that we'll experience, but there is a longer-term a challenge to the business by not advertising. I think if we can put that into financial terms, it seems to resonate much better, and then helps to make that business case for why don't we at least try and test our way into what might work today.
Yeah. And to build on that, long-term effectiveness is a capability that we're actively developing and actively measure. So working with clients right now today, we are measuring long-term effectiveness as well as the regular measures that we do for our marketing mix model, the regular effectiveness thing. So it's completely doable. It's part of the repertoire of things that you would do in this situation. And if you added that to maybe a previous MMM, that would give you the understanding of how this darkness might impact your business and give you another piece of information for the finance team.
Fantastic, brilliant. Hopefully that gives some ammunition, or at least some support in how to liaise with finance and really create that alliance. There's no us versus them. You know, we're all in this ship together, trying to weather the stormy waters. And also we do have some fantastic research on the topic of long-term effectiveness, which we'd be more than happy to share with anybody on this call today, or head to our website. We do have another question around the consumption of media patterns. How do marketers account for the changes in these consumptions of media patterns over the next sort of 3 to 6 months, potentially even longer? How can they start sort of planning? Sean, any thoughts?
Well, take advantage is the first. This is opportunity. This is like silver lining kind of stuff. When people are spending, 10 to 20% more of their time on channels and places that you can communicate with them, that's an opportunity. And then you combine that with the fact that the costs are lower, you're getting into one of those moments in time that doesn't happen very often. A couple of notes to it, though, a couple of sub notes to that are that digital is truly leapfrogging. So this entire COVID consumer pattern is impacting digital at a rate, I guess 3 to 5 times what TV watching is increasing. So people are going online, they're going on mobile, they're doing Netflix, they're not necessarily going to TV. So TV and high cost spending may not be the right answer in this moment in time. And that can make it more selective. It can be more precise about who you target and where you target them on which channels. And that taking that time at this moment might be the most valuable thing that you do as well.
Guess what we'll do is, hey guys, sorry, I was on mute, just making sure that you didn't hear me cough there. I want to start wrapping up, and I guess as we wrap up and give people their time, a couple of notes here. We will share more information about agent-based modeling. There's a few people here who have asked for more information, so we can absolutely do that. And if you would like more information, please let me know on the chat. We can send that across. And then the final question would be sort of top tip or top couple of tips for marketers to take away. For everybody dialed in or watching this post session, what is your advice, in this survival situation to take away as marketers? Sean, can I swing over to you on that one?
Sure. And I'll wait for my cue here. I'm going to kind of reiterate and kind of boil it down a little bit when we talk about this top tips thing, which is don't throw out the past, because the past is still a bridge to where we are today. So that it's very important that we understand what happened during COVID, and it starts with the way it was before. So don't discount it. Don't think the whole world and everything changed. It is important to have that bridge and gap. The second piece of that is then you need the data and the information, the fast moving data and information that is available to you today. So you've got the bridge to the past, and you can find out what happened in April. You can find out when you're in June what happened in April, May, and you should be knowing how those trends and how they're working themselves out in consumer habits and how people are doing things. And the last part of this then is test and learn fast. Test. There's that common term of fail fast. This is by far one of the best environments to do test, learn. You may fail, you may succeed, and move on to the next thing. Don't make humongous bets necessarily. Make smaller bets that you learn from and then are actively changing next month's media plan, next month's investment, next month's approach to your media mix. So those are my linear 3 tips.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Fantastic tips. Thank you so much, Sean. And now over to you, Karen, your sort of top tips for survival tips for these times for marketers today.
Beyond don't panic. I would, I completely agree with everything Sean said. I think the one additional thing I would add that is going to come across sounding very technical in light of Sean's bigger, broader themes is I think it's very clear that the United States will vary pretty significantly by geography, and that as different markets open up in different capacities and potentially then close back down and open back up, I think there's an opportunity for marketers to really think locally. I know, most marketers, particularly those businesses that are national in scale, tend to think about things from a national marketing perspective. But I think now is an opportunity for us to start to think about, are there certain things we can do in local geographies, and how can we take advantage of what is going to be very different circumstances for different people in different markets. So I know that sounds like a very tactical tip, but I think it's a very big shift in mindset for marketers that tend to think about big national media budgets and marketing budgets to start to think about what can I do at the local market level.
Fantastic. Brilliant. That's really, really good. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to both of you. I think you've given everybody some amazing advice. We will be, this session is recorded, so we will be sharing the recording following the session. I will share information about agent-based modeling to those that are interested, and thank you everybody for giving us some fantastic questions here today, and please stay tuned for the next episode and we can share details about that very, very shortly. Thank you very much, Sean and Karen. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for tuning in.